About 4:02 p.m. Let's call the Plan Commission meeting to order. I'm Shane Blazer, the mayor and chairperson of Plan Commission. Kyle, could you take roll call for the other members?
Certainly. So Chairperson Blazer is present. Alder Austin.
Here.
Burkhart. Excuse me, just taking a look at Zoom here. All right. Tao.
Here.
Feith.
Here.
Davin.
Here.
Gaudreau.
Here.
We have a quorum. That's 6.
Thank you. Our first item on business is approval of reports from April 18th Plan Commission meeting. What are your wishes?
Make a motion to accept as written. I'll second.
We have a motion. We have a motion by Gaudreau and seconded by Davin. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Item 2 is Vanderwall and Associates, Wisconsin Rapids Recovery and Redevelopment Plan update. Kyle?
Thank you. There's not a ton to update, other than just a reminder that the consultants will be holding, jointly with city staff, a planning charrette or workshop with both the Common Council and the Plan Commission on, let's see, May 10th at 5 p.m. within the Aquatic Center Community Room. And shortly thereafter, June 1st, we also tentatively have a public meeting scheduled, a public visioning and workshop meeting. So those two meetings are going to be key to allow the consultant to take the next steps with regards to the project. We've seen some of the preliminary mapping and some of the preliminary spreadsheets, and they appear to be very detailed. They've also, for the most part, wrapped up a lot of their calls with stakeholders and other groups. So I think at those the joint meeting in a week, you'll be provided with much more information and some of the preliminary findings, but also asked to provide your feedback. That is all I have regarding this item, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, moving on to item 3 is the election of a vice chairperson. So I talked to the city attorney, and by ordinance, the mayor is the chairperson of the Plan Commission, but also we can elect a vice chairperson. Usually when I'm not able to attend, I've asked Ryan to sit in for me, but we can formally choose a vice chairperson. So anybody want to make any nominations for a vice chairperson?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Austin.
I'll second that.
I'll second that.
How do you feel about that, Ryan?
I'll accept that nomination.
Okay, so I guess in all form procedures, looking for a motion for unanimous consent to appoint Ryan Austin as the vice chairperson of Plan Commission. Yeah, I can make that motion. Is there a second?
Second that.
A second by Tao. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? That motion carries. Congratulations, now you're official. Item 4 is Julie Gessert, extraterritorial CSM, request for a certified survey map to create 2 lots, which are under 5 acres within the town of Grand Rapids. The subject property is at 2840 Saratoga Street, parcel ID 0700282. Mr. Kearns?
Thank you. I want to start out by clarifying that the city has extraterritorial control for subdivision plat review. We do not have extraterritorial control under statute for zoning. It's something that was recommended in our comprehensive plan, but nothing that we've pursued at this point. So with regards to my memo, while I identify a few concerns regarding future land use, we don't unfortunately have the ability to regulate the use based on land, rather how it's subdivided and so forth. And with that being said, the lots are relatively similar to other residential lots within the vicinity, and I think it would be fitting from a lot standpoint. I also reached out to the Water and Light Commission, and they noted that they do not have any concerns. It's not within our our well protection zone, and the property is large enough that any nitrates from any septic shouldn't be a concern. You'll see there that the future land use map does identify it as commercial. Again, however, because we do not have extraterritorial control from a zoning standpoint, we could not deny something like this for grounds based on the use. With that being said, we then would recommend approval. Thank you.
Commission, any questions, comments, or what are your wishes?
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Eric, second by Ryan, to approve the request. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? That motion carries. We're on to item number 5, which is Plan 22-00287, Happy Hippo Construction LLC, request for a certified survey map to create 2 lots at 2211 A Street South, parcel ID 3412196, and a dedicated right-of-way on A Street South, Goodnow Avenue, and 10th Street South. Mr. Kearns.
Thank you. So you'll find a handout in front of you. One is an updated CSM that shows the right-of-way that's proposed to be dedicated on the three frontages. The other is a site plan that shows a little more with regards to parking, building dimensions, and so forth. From a review standpoint, anytime there's a new lot created, Plan Commission is the authority or has the authority to approve those newly created lots. In this case, we've got a request to take 1 lot and create 2 from that 1 lot. I think the uniqueness here is that the lot line, as you can see from the CSM, is right down between both of the buildings. And so what ultimately happens in this case is you create a non-conforming building from the approval of a CSM like this. However, from a subdivision standpoint, from a lot standpoint, the lots do appear to meet the requirements in terms of width, lot size, access, ingress, egress. There is a reference to an existing easement, shared access easement. And from a parking standpoint, we've done parking ratios and calculations, and the parking requirements for the uses would be met as well. Again, really the only concern that staff has is that nonconformity that's created. And I do want to speak further to that. In many communities, you can subdivide along what's called a common wall. And there's many zero-lot duplexes or twin homes that have that common wall separation, meaning that there's no setback between that lot line. It's one wall, or in some cases, there's 2 walls that are butting up. While not as common in a commercial setting, there are instances in the community where they do exist. There's another on 8th Street. The difference with the one on 8th Street is that it seemed to be originally platted with those lots and with that nonconformity, meaning that the buildings were constructed either all together or individually directly adjacent to each other. And this was decades ago when the other example was originally platted. Similarly, however, our subdivision code does permit condominiums, a condominium being like shared common land, and then owners of the dwelling units, own and occupy that dwelling unit, but it ends at the building walls, and they do not own or occupy any of or they don't own any of the land area or the common areas. And so in that case, obviously, there's no setbacks. The lot lines are actually the walls that separate the dwelling units. So while we allow for those type of uses, other uses, similarly within our zoning code and our subdivision plat, there really isn't clarity in regards to a zero lot line in this case for a commercial type of application. Nonetheless, again, I'm familiar with other communities having done it. I think there can be some challenges to doing it, but I also see the benefit to doing it from a use standpoint, creating separation. If this were to be reversed, an item like this, if you want to build a second principal building on a lot, it would have to come to Plan Commission. So we do account for the reverse if somebody ever wants to build a second building on one lot. But there's this kind of gray area with regards to dividing a lot and utilizing kind of that common wall with no setback between those buildings. With that, I will certainly entertain any questions that the commission has or provide further details. I believe the applicant is here as well.
Larry, do you wish to speak at all, or your avail?
All right. I'm Larry Koopman from Lampert Lee and Associates, and I'm representing Happy Hippo Construction. And as Mr. Kearns indicated, we are requesting a zero lot line in this case. Kyle had led me to believe earlier that even though the normal setback, side yard setback is 20 feet, that the zero lot line isn't necessarily prohibited. In this particular case, I don't know how many of you know Mr. Richard Raychek, Happy Hippo Construction, but Dick is in his 80s. He has no heirs. He's had some health problems recently. He's in the process of trying to get his estate in order and either sell and donate the proceeds to charity or donate some of his properties to charity. In this particular case, he's been entertaining a big box developer for the Staples site. So this is the Staples building, originally built as Staples, at another use after that, a retail sales store. And then the Social Security Administration offices are in the smaller building. And he is close to an agreement with this big box, but the deal is contingent upon approval of this CSM because they don't want to be a renter of another piece of property on there, and it's important to them for their business plan that they purchase the property from Dick. And otherwise, there are some nonconformities on the property now, but they're all legally nonconforming. This is aside from the zero lot line setback issue. When the ordinance were updated a few years ago, the side lot setback was changed from 15 feet to 20 feet. That made one of the side yard setbacks on the Staples building legally non-conforming. With this recent right-of-way dedication, the 25-foot setback that we had from Goodnoe Avenue has been reduced to 22 feet. So that now is also legally non-conforming. But everything else on the site was approved by Plan Commission. It met all of the zoning regulations at the time, although there's green space requirements now that weren't part of the ordinance at that time, and so it's slightly non-conforming from a green space issue. But I would just urge the commission to approve this. I think it makes really good sense for Mr. Ajak and for the city of Wisconsin Rapids. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? Be willing to entertain a motion if somebody had one?
I'll make a motion to approve the plan with the restrictions based on Kyle's interjections.
Thank you. I'll second the motion. So we have a motion by Goodrow, seconded by Blazer, to approve the creation of the two lots with the staff recommendations. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody oppose? That motion carries. All right, moving on to item number 6, Plan 22-000256, Dan Gunstein, request for a site plan review to construct a car wash at 4120 A Street South, parcel ID 3414102. Is that,
Yep.
okay,
All right.
go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Blazer, members of the commission. So the next item before you is to construct a car wash at 4120 A Street South. It would be new construction, and car washes fall under our vehicle service shop description in the zoning code pretty clearly, and they're permitted use in the B2 General Commercial District. So just some background, the site is Zone B2 General Commercial. It's currently operating as a U-Haul rental facility. And the proposed project, as I said, is new construction. It would be a drive-through car wash, which falls under that vehicle service shop description. And here's some site photos as the site exists today or as of a couple weeks ago. So the use and dimensional standards are met, and city engineering is suggesting modifications to the proposed ingress and egress of the site to minimize vehicle conflict points, and I'm going to go back to that site plan. Oh, okay. So the way it's proposed now is vehicles would enter either from 8th Street or Dove Avenue. They are suggesting one-way egress from 8th or elimination of that eastern Dove Avenue entrance. So vehicles travel through now, use one of 3 lanes, go through the car wash, and then they can enter any of those parking stalls and use vacuum units. So that would be a change that we'd be looking at suggesting. Parking requirements are met, except for the maximum requirement. Our zoning ordinance includes both a minimum and a maximum. But on the maximum, the Plan Commission can make a special exception due to the particular use or location. And we're suggesting in this case that an exception be granted due to the use, because it is kind of a type of use that has heavy usage seasonally and you know, different, on nice days and different days of the week and things like that. So it would kind of be a use that would have a lot of fluctuation in terms of parking and usage. The proposed landscaping is generous and well met. Architectural requirements are met. I'm going to go forward to that. These are the renderings. There's some slight differences. These are elevations that were provided that are probably used, you know, for different sites. The proposal before you does not include that red canopy at kind of the midpoint. The vacuum areas would not have that canopy. Otherwise, it's very similar in the elevation on the upper left. It's the black gooseneck lighting with the black canopy. Similar materials, split face block with the stone accents. So very similar in style, just with the elimination of that red canopy. And then we are also suggesting submission of a lighting plan as a condition of approval. So staff is recommending approval with conditions, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to help answer them. And a representative of the applicant is also present if you have questions for them.
I guess my only question is, has the parking or the ingress egress been communicated with them and they were fine with that?
It has been communicated. I'm not sure what their preference is in terms of the options, so maybe the applicant could speak more to that.
I am on the phone. This is Dan Gunstein, if you have any
I
questions.
apologize. Okay, thank you, Dan. So someone is available on the phone. Dan, did you want to respond to that question about ingress and egress and where you're at with that?
Well, first off, thank you guys for reviewing this, and thank you to your staff for all the hard work you guys have been putting in with my engineers. I really appreciate it. We're excited to bring this before you today. So 2 things that we really look for when we're looking at a site or a successful site is everything that flows properly. So the more egress, the better. The more ingress, the better. And then parking. I know that the amount of parking stalls may exceed what you guys typically have, if that's what I'm hearing correctly. But a lot of those are vacuum stalls, which allow us to accommodate more customers at a time. As far as the egress, we really want to capture as much traffic off of 8th Street as possible. So for us, I mean, that's a big deal. But, I think my engineer's on the phone also, in regards to that. So what is the question at hand on that? I couldn't hear real well when you guys were talking.
Okay, so Dan, the engineering department's recommending either one-way access off of 8th or eliminating the eastern Dove Avenue entrance. So if you really want to maintain the 8th two-way ingress and egress, then they would ask that you eliminate the easternmost entrance on Dove.
The eastern being closest to 8th, is that correct?
Correct, yep.
Oh, all right. I think we can accommodate that. I would love to have an egress in and maybe not an egress out there if it was doable.
So that's something we could approach them with. We could see if they're willing to have ingress on that eastern Dove access point, but if not, if we could look at a.
My goal is that somebody would wash their car, and how my car wash works, if anybody would like me to explain, I'd be happy to. But the goal would be they would exit the car wash, they would come around, they would get their car vacuumed, they would vacuum their car, and then, my opinion, egress being the farthest west point would be the best way to keep traffic from the intersection and the bottleneck that would be caused by that. So for me, an ingress would be great because that would mean our customers can come in, vacuum, and then they can go out to the western exit
So you're saying you,
on Dove.
okay, so you'd like to maintain the two-way off of 8th and the western entrance on Dove, and then still maintain an ingress point on that Dove access closest to 8th, if
I
possible?
would do, that's really ideal for our business because we're like a gas station. We're an impulse business. So we like to have as much accessibility. So if somebody passes the entrance on 8th, they can turn onto Dove and come in without going through the whole vacuum corral, as I would call it.
If
I don't know.
they weren't okay with that worst case scenario, would you be okay with eliminating that entrance and exit point on Dove? The one near
I
8th?
would.
Okay,
I
but
would. I
ideally
prefer
you'd
not
like
to,
ingress.
But yes, I would.
Mr. Chair, this is Susan.
Go ahead,
May I
Susan.
ask a question?
Yes.
The question has to do with an ordinance that I bumped up against some time ago, which I believe says that you have to have your ingress, egress on the subordinate street. So that would be Dove Avenue in this case, 50 feet from the major thoroughfare. Is that not one of our traffic ordinances or one of our engineering requirements? And I don't, from the plan, I couldn't determine the exact distance from 8th Street to the eastern curb of the ingress on Dove Avenue.
I mean, that would make sense because that's likely the part of their rationale for wanting to reduce the contact points.
Well, if there were to be an eastern ingress, egress on Dove Avenue, I would recommend that we accommodate whatever our engineering restriction is to that 50-foot setback from 8th Street.
Okay.
I believe this is Dan Gonzaga, but believe that egress on Dove Avenue on the eastern end of it, and my engineer's on the phone too. He might be able to answer that better, but I believe it is close to 50 feet away from the intersection.
Yeah,
You'd have to pull up the background drawing and see.
Yeah, this is Matt. I'm with the engineer's office. We are from the right-of-way line or the property line. We are 43 feet to the first point of that access, the ingress. So from the intersection, we would be, if you add whatever the distance is, I don't have the exact measurement.
It's 15 feet on top of that 42.
Yeah. So okay. So we would be 50 or 68 feet from the actual intersection itself.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I just had a question about the neighbor's property. I see that their garage and other stuff may be on the property. Is that going to be a concern?
This is Matt from the engineer's office. That was brought up, and we had some discussions with the city on a couple occasions, kind of back and forth as we developed and redeveloped the plan that has been submitted. And what we're providing is a privacy fence along the full extent of that west property line. Along with, if you further go on, there's some width to the landscape plan. So in addition to the privacy fence, we are providing on the proposed development side, some significant screening in terms of evergreens and shrubbery and things like that. So
I'm not sure if it's just the picture, but on page 20 of our packet, it just looks like that property line goes right through the garage. So I don't know if that fence was going to be on the property line or set back, or is that a concern of
yeah, well, the
planning, you guys?
yeah, unfortunately, the GIS or the geographic informational systems don't necessarily always correlate one for one with the actual imagery for what is actually surveyed. So the line that we're showing, where the fence is 1 foot off of the property line, and so their garage would be approximately 5 to 6 feet off of the fence, west of the fence.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
I'll move to approve, subject to staff recommendations.
We have a motion by Austin,
I'll second.
second by Goodrow. Is there any other questions, comments?
Is that approving, in that motion, is that two-way on 8th Street and only ingress on the most eastern one?
Yes.
I was just going to ask for clarification if you wanted to add that condition as discussed or not.
Yes, the motion would include the discussion with the ingress egress that was decided upon there. Carrie.
Subject to the approval of engineering. I think the two options that we received from them were either one way on 8th or eliminating the easternmost stuff. So if we're looking at ingress only on Dove, I think it would have to be per engineering approval. Right, and then,
Yeah, so typically, this is more unique because it's a corner lot. So typically, you have access as an existing lot of record to whatever street. When you talk about additional ingress, egress to the site, that's where I think engineering has more authority to regulate where that ingress, egress is located and/or the proximity to any existing intersections, what type of road classification the street intersections are. And you're right, there is the 50 feet, I believe, streets intersecting an arterial highway within 50 feet of the grade of the intersection at the right-of-way. There should be no direct public access. So again, depending on, I think, the parameters of the driveway, I think engineering has a little more control in this case because it's a corner lot. And, we typically divert to the city engineer with regards to any additional concerns they may have to improve public safety and access to the right-of-way, and, circulation through the site also.
So we include on the motion, subject to engineering's recommendation or approval with ingress egress?
yeah, I would say something like condition of approval requiring one-way egress on the eastern Dove entrance or elimination of that subject to engineering approval or something along those lines, just so we have a backup plan if they don't approve that we can still move forward and just eliminate that, because the applicant also said that met their needs.
Agreed, so I'll amend my motion to such.
And you're good with that, Goodrow?
Second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? That motion carries. Moving to item 7, Plan 22-000205, Anderson's Bulk Fuel Storage, public hearing and action on a request for a conditional use permit to construct bulk fuel storage tanks at 4,000 Commerce Drive, parcel ID 3409858. And as in previous public hearings, let's have Mr. Kearns kind of go over the item. We'll have the public hearing, and then we'll have our discussion.
Okay, so the
Or,
item.
sorry, Carrie.
The item before you is for Anderson Bulk Fuel Storage. It's a public hearing and action on a request for conditional use permit for bulk fuel storage tanks at 4,000 Commerce Drive. So a little bit of background. So the Andersons has been operating for a while, a successful wholesale manufacturing and distribution terminal for liquid plant nutrients. This existing use falls under the manufacturing description, which is a permitted use in the B2 General Commercial District under the zoning code. So the proposed use is to add a second use to the property, which is bulk fuel storage, and this use does require conditional use permit in the B2 General Commercial District, and so that is what is before you today. And just to point out on the photo on this slide, so this is a rendering showing the location of where they're placing these 360,000 gallon tanks. The drawing shows 4. They were kind of on the line between 3 and 4, and their engineering report provided for 4, but they're doing 3 at this time. So if they wanted to add a 4th, they would come back for conditional use permit amendment. So the parcel is adequate and suitable to accommodate the proposed use, and the use is consistent with surrounding uses and other uses on the parcel. It's sufficient to accommodate parking and the anticipated increase in truck traffic. The way the business would operate is propane would be offloaded from railroad cars and then unloaded onto trucks that would be able to access around the clock. So they just have a key code, they can come in, do what they need to do anytime around the clock and then leave. And this combination they have on other sites, and it has been operating successfully. So they do have some practice with these two uses kind of being combined. But there is a rail spur extension that is included as part of this proposal for those rail cars to provide that to the site. We're anticipating limited impact to the natural environment, except for the increased, emissions from additional truck traffic. And again, steady round-the-clock truck traffic is anticipated. The surrounding transportation infrastructure can accommodate this, and surrounding uses are compatible with this increased truck traffic. It should really only be impacting other businesses and uses that are kind of similar in nature. There isn't a lot of mixed uses from that site to the highways that the trucks would be accessing. And so staff feels that this use is in keeping with the larger planning vision for the business park. And these are just some site photos. I'm sure you're very familiar with the site. Just a couple other things I did want to note were that there are some supplemental standards with this use, and they're outlined in the staff report. And this project meets all of those as well. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and the applicant is here tonight also.
Thank you. So it's 4:33, so let's open up the public hearing, and I will call 3 times if anybody wishes to speak against the request. So for a first time, does anybody wish to speak against the request? And for a second time, you wish to speak against? Well, if you want to come up to the microphone and.
Okay, Council, I'm Keith Borski. I live at 1421 48th Street North. This plan that they're doing is hitting the southeast, be the northwest corner of my property for their buffer zone. So I'm just wondering what kind of protections they're going to be using to keep the gas inside without any leaks and whatnot. Because that's why because they say there's no environmental damages going to it. But I know that by railroad spur there, it does hold water. So there is wildlife that nests inside there. And that's that and all that and the noise it's going to produce, the extra noise. The rail cars, the trucks going in and out of there. That's pretty much my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think the applicant would be able to answer that because there is a similar kind of combination elsewhere, correct? At one of your other sites?
So why don't we finish the public hearing and then we can kind of answer those questions then. So for a third time, does anybody wish to speak against the request? Okay, seeing none, does anybody wish to speak in favor of the request? For a second time, does anybody wish to speak in favor of the request? And lastly, for a third time, does anybody wish to speak in favor? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing at 4:35 PM, and we will go into the discussion. Do you wish to maybe address those concerns publicly or in the microphone?
Hi, I'm Jeff Massville with the Andersons. We've been there since the Andersons purchased that property in 2009 from Hartung Brothers, when Hartung Brothers built the liquid fertilizer facility. In 2014-13, we built a dry building and that's been running successful. Part of our trade group in the Andersons runs propane. That's part of their deal. And we've put together a terminal down in Arena, Wisconsin, which is very similar to what we do in Rapids, liquid fertilizer, and they put a LP terminal in down there. He has some concerns about the release of vapors or something to that standard. I mean, we don't want any releases of anything. I mean, that's just part of the nature of the product. You don't want to lose any vapor. That's your money. That's your so. If there were with these systems, I don't know if Troy is on today or not. Troy from Westmore Fluid Solutions.
I am Jeff.
Would you want to comment on the like the check valving and all of that goes with the building of something like this?
Sure. So this terminal, as Jeff said, we've collaborated, or the Andersons. Let me introduce myself quickly. Troy Case with Westmore Fluid Solutions. We are a mechanical contractor out of Minnesota, and we've built several of these facilities in the Midwestern part of the United States. But these would all be subject to NFPA 58, the code. With regards to leaks, it's a great question, but I would tell you that these LP systems are all what we consider closed systems, okay? So they're closed, they're under pressure. There are pressure reliefs on the tank. There are pressure reliefs between valves and all the piping that will release in the event there is an issue or there's a buildup of excessive pressure. The liquid itself, if there is a leak, you're not going to leak liquid. You're going to leak, it's going to immediately turn to vapor. Propane boils off at minus 44 degrees Fahrenheit, so you're going to have a release of vapor. Obviously, with the release, local fire departments would be your response teams for that, any type of release or an emergency to remedy that, an incident, I guess, so to speak. So I would say that these systems are very, very safe if handled properly, built properly, and followed. You follow NFPA 58 to the code with respect to building them. So I don't know if that helps the gentleman's his mind a little bit. I'm certainly willing to entertain any other questions that you might have about it, if you have any.
You good?
He's good.
Does anybody else have any questions, comments, wishes?
I just had a question about staff recommendation number 2 about the paving. So like that, looks like you have a gravel driveway there. They would have to pave that to have this, or just new stuff?
The driveway.
Right, go ahead.
The driveway coming into the facility is paved now. The only part that is not paved is that loop that goes around toward that dry building, and that's on our driveway. So we've addressed the paving situation some years ago coming out to the main street. So any stones or anything that would be on tires would be lost in our yard going out. Yep.
The condition exists in the event that they extend any new driveways, they would have to be hard surfaced. That's the current code. You can't technically extend asphalt or gravel driveways. Any extension or new driveway has to be hard surfaced.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I just didn't want to have them have to do that.
What is your what does your current operation look like without these tanks?
as far as,
Where are you getting your LP for your operations right now? Or are you just looking to store on
we
site for more
don't store
consistency?
LP there now.
Yeah.
We just have 2,000 gallon tanks that we use on our facility for heat and water.
Okay.
The tanks that would be put in would be offloaded from rail cars, and then semis would be hauling it away and taking it to like Kirschner's or Allied Co-op or whoever has one of them bullets out in the field you see along the road. That's where this goes.
It's like an
It would give it gives them another option. Junction City right now, this is where most guys go and get their LP now. It gives them another option where if there's not pumping LP into that system up there, they can come to Rapids. They go to Wapaka, wherever to pick up their LP if in the case that there's none available.
Thanks.
It looks like there's some perimeter fencing. Is there any type of security fencing required with a operation like this, Kyle?
Yeah, this is Troy from Westmore Fluid Solutions again. So with regard to security and crash protection, that is all governed by NFPA 58. So to answer your question, I guess quickly, yes, security is required. This particular facility right now does have fencing that we believe is sufficient to meet NFPA 58 requirements. It's fenced on all 4 sides. With regards to the crash protection, that is part of the build. That'll be part of the scope work to provide protection not only to the piping, but to the tanks, and then also to the truck loading skid, which would be on the north end of the, project to prevent any truck incidents, accidents from hitting any of that equipment.
Along with that, we do have camera surveillance on the property at this time. That area is not under surveillance, but it will be. We're going to put, just for our sake, we can watch the trucks coming in, going out. We can also watch the guys that are unloading the rail cars at the same time. So that's part of the plan, is we'll get a camera system put in over there also.
Thank you.
I want to comment that we have a supplemental standard that the fire chief review this, and the fire chief has seen this, the interim chief, and he doesn't have any concerns beyond what's been presented.
We've been real good with the fire department here in Rapids. Anything that we do out there, we invite them out to come out and see what we're doing, invite them out. If they got any training they'd like to do, more than welcome to come out and do it. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, Troy Case here again with Westmore Food Solutions. Just to bounce off that a little bit more, we strongly encourage local fire chief or any authority having jurisdiction as we go through this process. And when we get to the point where we're actually going to put pressure to the system, and we'll do that with air or nitrogen. And what we'll do is we'll put pressure gauges on that piping. We'd like that authority to come out, take a picture, document it, and we'll document it as well, and look at that, and then 24 hours later have an opportunity to maybe come back, and maybe we can just share a picture, again, with that fire chief or that authority having jurisdiction to verify that there are no leaks in that system. So again, we strongly encourage that participation from local emergency responders to take part in that as we reach those milestones in the project.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Jane, this is Susan.
Yes, go ahead.
My question had more to do with the interrelationship between the fertilizer and the propane with regard to safety issues of any kind, since it was stated that there was about 175 feet between the 2 facilities. Anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's more than sufficient with regards to NFPA 58 code. So we've got setbacks that you have to take into consideration a number of things: important buildings, property, adjoining property lines, point of transfers, and that 170 feet from the east side of the existing building to the, I'm going to call it the west bank, the furthest west bank of that tank. That 170 feet is more than sufficient. I don't have the code in front of me right now, but I believe that separation or that setback distance to an important building is still only 50 to 75 feet. So again, very, very safe equipment, very safe facilities when you follow that code.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll make a motion to approve Plan 22-000205 with staff recommendations as outlined.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Eric, seconded by Ben. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? That motion carries. We're on to item 8, Plan 22-0195, Mario Dickens. Public hearing and action on a request from Mario Dickens for a conditional use permit to operate a truck trailer rental establishment at 711 East Grand Avenue, parcel ID 3407803. Could you please introduce the item?
Yep.
Thank you.
So the next item, as you said, is the applicant is Mario Dickens for a conditional use permit to operate a truck trailer rental establishment, otherwise known as a U-Haul kind of establishment. So the applicant is here tonight, and this was brought to the attention of staff because it was because the applicant didn't realize there was a conditional use permit requirement. The business was operating as such, and some of you have probably noticed that. But when he was notified, he did promptly meet with city staff to find out what steps needed to be taken. And so he's before you tonight with the conditional use permit application. As it exists now, the property is known as a U-Haul neighborhood dealer facility, and the rental process happens kind of outside the facility. So you book it online or with your smartphone or whatever, and then the keys are kind of handed off to the renter. So that's how it's operating now. It's the hope of the applicant that he is able to operate a retail space that would offer some more services typically seen with U-Haul dealers. So a truck trailer rental business does require a conditional use permit in the B2 General Commercial District. And as I said, they were unaware of the conditional use permit requirement. So after staff review, it's staff's opinion that the parcel is sufficient to accommodate the proposed use and is consistent with other uses on the property. For the most part, it is surrounded by similar uses. It's on a busier intersection in the city and is surrounded primarily by other commercial uses with the exception of a single-family residence that's located to the northwest. However, the trucks and trailers are required to be stored outside of the setback areas, which should help to mitigate some of the impact, the noise, and car lights and things like that, some of that type of impact to that residence. After reviewing the site plan, there is sufficient space for parking, truck and trailer storage, and ingress and egress. However, staff is requesting an updated site plan to show exact parking and drive out locations. There was a preliminary one submitted, but we'd like a little more detail about how the cars specifically would fit. It was kind of a general one with locations kind of generally delineated. We feel the use is appropriate to the zoning district, the site, and the surrounding uses. And here's some site photos taken fairly recently. And we are recommending approval with conditions.
Thank you. So once again, at 4:49 PM, I'll call the public meeting to order, or the hearing. Does anybody wish to speak against the request? Did you want to, sir?
I'm Keith Loopy, and I'm representing Bob Hewitt, the owner of 122 8th Street South. And he has signage in front of those tenants who leased parts of that building from him. And his concern is the map that I have here shows employee parking along the northeast corner and an ingress off of 8th Street. And then it shows cars, a car lot. Is this a equipment rental for U-Haul, or is it a used car business, or what? What are we dealing with off of the map that I have here? I'm not we're not quite certain as to where this whole layout is, the way it's shown on this map, the only document I have. So I questioned the committee about employee parking along there. Does that mean there's high-profile vehicles going to be parked on that northeast side? I'd like, perhaps those questions could be answered by the owner, and whether or not car sales is going to be allowed on that lot along with truck and trailer rentals? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We can ask the applicant as we progress through this, but yes. Does anybody else wish to speak against the request? And is there, for a third time, does anybody wish to speak against the request? Okay, for the first time, does anybody wish to speak in favor of the request? And secondly, or for a second time, does anybody wish to speak in favor of the request? And for a final and third time, does anybody wish to speak in favor? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing at 4:51 p.m. And I guess we already have our first set of questions for the applicant, or if planning
Yeah,
if
just
you know.
a couple quick things, and I know the applicant will be eager to answer also, but staff also has concerns about the site plan that was submitted. That employee parking is somewhat redundant. The applicant does meet the parking requirements with that parking shown toward the front of the lot, so that's unnecessary. But, and we agree, I mean, with parking as close to where cars would be coming in and exiting, that would not be a good location for parking. But that is what we're asking. We just need to see a clearer picture of U-Haul storage by space, not just area, as well as the parking requirement met by space. There was a parking analysis done. I believe it was 12 spaces that were required. There's a mix of uses that the applicant is proposing on site, most of which are permitted by right in this zoning district, vehicle sales being one of them. So what's before you tonight is the conditional use permit for the truck trailer rental. That does require the conditional use permit. But we do allow more than one use to exist on a property by right. But again, those 4 spaces to the north, east on that parcel would not be necessary.
Did that answer your questions, or? Okay. Are there any additional questions?
Mr. Chair, Susan?
Yes, go ahead, Susan.
A couple of questions. These, I suppose, go to Carrie and Kyle. The same drawing that the gentleman referred to before shows absolutely no landscaping. It shows the car display area. I believe it is the black on there. I can't read the patron parking, it says. It looks like it abuts the sidewalk on East Grand Avenue. I don't see any indication that there would be any screening provided on the north side of this piece of property, nor do I see any landscaping mentioned with regard to this. Is that not required in this district?
So it would, if it were new construction, it definitely would be, because it's an existing lot and it's like, as you said, pretty much completely paved. It's not something that we require when all the infrastructure is in place. Now, if the applicant were going to do a reconstruction, they would need to integrate the landscaping as would be required for new construction. However, screening, if you were requiring it by a fence or something like that, could definitely be added as a condition of approval. If we wanted to do, the U-Hauls or some way to screen some of what's on site. However, typically with these types of uses, part of the appeal is that the business owner wants clientele to see, what they have available for rental, but screening could be a condition of approval if we wanted to add that.
Well, Susan again, we have a residential property on, it would be the west end of the backside, the north side of the lot, and then we have a parking lot for what used to be a grocery store, and I presume that the person who spoke in the public hearing is someone who is a lessee in that building, if I'm not mistaken. Is there any sentiment, or has anyone discussed this with those property owners to the north?
We did hear, Kyle, I believe, received a call from one of the property owners to the north.
Right, so the gentleman here that spoke earlier, representing Robert Hewitt, did call us and identify concerns that they had. Again, he's the property owner to the northeast. With regards to other notices, obviously the public hearing today is an opportunity for the public to provide comment, but we also notified individuals within, or property owners within a 300-foot boundary surrounding the property. And Mr. Hewitt was the only one that contacted our office prior to the meeting.
Thank you. I have one other question, and that regards signage. And I don't see any specification here with regard to signage. Does that mean that this property owner would be required to come back if they were to put a sign of some substance on this property somewhere?
So we currently have wall signs that are proposed, and that would be approved within our office as just a general kind of sign permit. I don't believe at this time that the applicant's looking at doing any ground signs or any kind of additional signage. I think at this time it's only wall signs. But I do want to note, I think the adding a condition of approval for a fence along that property line would be something that would definitely make sense with the uses that are adjacent to the property.
I guess I was just thinking about that fence on the northeast side that may block off that business's view. People coming down 8th Street may want to see their front door there. I guess I also had a question about, it does say that number 5, parking shall be striped. I know that the intersection more by 8th and East Grand is pretty much gravel. I don't think it's all one really paved, one solid piece. I think there's a lot of mix in there. Would paving have to be a requirement?
Yes, my understanding was that this site was wholly paved, but the applicant can maybe speak better to that. But there could be, if there is any area that's gravel and it would be for parking or ingress and egress, they would have to pave that. Do you want to speak to that, Mario? Is there any of the site that's not paved at this time? Yeah.
The entire site is paved. There's a few areas where, while we were cleaning the asphalt, that we got a little deep down, and I may need to get some fill. But the entire lot is paved.
Thank you. Any other questions? As long as Mario's at the podium. Okay. Seeing none, what are your wishes?
I'll make a motion to approve Plan 22-0195, subject to staff recommendations.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Ryan, second by Ben. Is there any further discussion? Go ahead, Kyle.
That's as written in the staff report?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're at item 9, which is Plan 22-00259, Community Development Department, public hearing and action on a request from the City of Wisconsin Rapids to to amend Chapter 11 zoning ordinance, specifically Appendix B 5.04 overnight lodging, to permit the permanent residence of an on-site manager as an accessory use within a dwelling unit.
So this item, it was brought to our attention that there were some issues in hotels in the city, a couple instances where stays were exceeding the permitted amount of time. So just a couple definitions that are relevant to this discussion. So overnight lodging is a place where individual guest rooms with private bathrooms are offered to transient guests for rent. And then our zoning code defines transient as a person who travels to a location away from his or her permanent address for a period of less than 30 consecutive calendar days for vacation, pleasure, culture, business, or employment. So when we kind of looked at this, I mean, we had one area that just could consistently be enforced where guests are not allowed to stay in excess of 30 days at a hotel in the city. But we had kind of a second issue, or item, I guess I should say, that was identified where maybe a hotel would desire to have an on-site manager who lives there year-round. So that we feel is a separate issue from guests that are staying and kind of living at a hotel. So benefits to on-site management would be the property owner would be required to obtain the necessary permits to construct a separate dwelling unit that meets IEBC and IBC requirements. So it couldn't just be, for example, that room 208 or whatever is just going to be the on-site manager. I mean, it would need to be a unit that's constructed to meet, dwelling code or building code requirements and meet dwelling standards.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by.
And then the second thing is having someone on site arguably would provide enhancements to patron safety, for other guests of the hotel to have an on-site manager there who can quickly respond to issues. It could also enhance communication.
Enter your participant ID followed.
It could also create enhanced communication between Wood County Health Department, the city, or other oversight agencies that may, need a quick communication with an on-site contact. It may be helpful. And then another thing in looking at our zoning code, and these aren't exactly the same uses by any means, but they could be, similar types of uses. Our description for campground and group recreation camp both allow dwelling units for managers as part of our description. So we thought consistent with that would be if we were to amend the Chapter 11 zoning 5.04 for overnight lodging, the description would read as follows, and there would be a second sentence that states accessory uses may include a dwelling unit for an on-site hotel motel manager. And this language is very similar to the language in the campground and the group recreation camp. Both campground allows for a dwelling unit for the manager of the campground, and then group recreation camp allows for a dwelling unit for the manager of the camp. So that was kind of the rationale behind making this amendment. And I would be happy to answer any questions or provide more information as needed.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
So the amendment is really just for this on-site manager. I think the introduction included the 30 or greater days stay.
Yeah, so
This is just for on-site manager that we're reviewing tonight.
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Just for
So everything would stay the same. So guests still could not stay longer than 30 days, just universally. I mean, that's just the policy throughout the city, and we want to maintain, hotels are for temporary stays consistently. This would just be the one time that we would see a rationale for somebody staying longer would be if they were an on-site manager in an approved unit for that purpose.
So then approval would have to go through your office to be like registered as an on-site place, like a hotel would have to contact you and say that this area is approved or?
Well, I mean, as it's written now, because there are other uses in the zoning code where there's a registry, like a non-conforming registry or situations like that. So that could be a suggestion that we'd have. I mean, but that we'd probably want to add additional language if we had a formal registry. As it stands now, they would need to go through us for all the building code requirements to construct the actual unit. But that would be, if that's something the Plan Commission thought would be an additional kind of check and balance that would be good to have through the Community Development Department, we would then want to include, and a registry shall be maintained or something like that.
And then how would this, this be enforced through your department? Is that the same that enforcing would be for the 30 days? Do you guys enforce that, or how is that brought to your attention?
Yeah, when it's brought to our attention, it's a zoning violation. In a couple of recent examples, the police department has responded to a request and has noted that somebody's claiming permanent residency at a hotel. And if that's the case, and we can confirm that or prove that, we'll issue a zoning violation letter and require them to vacate the premise.
Okay.
I also want to note that with regards to our office involvement, I mean, there's substantial changes that you'd have to make to a building that has a commercial hotel and a single-family dwelling unit, or I guess a dwelling unit. You'd have to have proper firewall separation. You'd have to have 2 points of ingress and egress, which most hotel rooms, it's in you go, and there's a single access point. So again, there's that significant building improvement that would have to be made, and I don't think a lot of hotels are set up to do this. But I think certainly as industry changes and stuff, I think there's a benefit to allowing this and allowing an on-site manager. As Carrie alluded to, some of the benefits are increased response if there's issues at a hotel, maintenance, upkeep, health department involvement, and so forth.
And then are you aware of any hotels that are operating like this currently that have an on-site, someone living there?
Yes, we're aware of one that is operating like this.
Okay. I can think of one too, but as long as there's follow-up after this, I'd go for that, yeah.
Sure.
So this would then cause them to bring that dwelling up to code, or would they be grandfathered in with what they currently have at these facilities that we're talking about?
So the current example did go through building permit processes and separated the unit. It was at the time that we were adopting the new zoning ordinance, so there isn't a whole lot of clarity in terms of the time that it was actually completed versus the time that the building permits were issued. So it's very possible it's been grandfathered in, because I don't think previously, I think you could have possibly done it because it would have been like a mixed-use type building. So I don't think it's, this in no means is to address that current situation. This is more so to address that there are many individuals in the community that are residing permanently at these hotels, and our office is going to play, I think, a stronger role in the enforcement of that, but then also just recognizing that it is of benefit to have an on-site manager. It's not uncommon in other industries to have a resident living on site. Again, if there's proper building codes that are met that are for the separation, access, and things of that nature.
Kind of going back to the 30 days, 30 consecutive days. Have you seen other language, other places, something about, a number of days out of a bigger period, out of 120 or something? I'm just thinking of you stay for 29, you go stay somewhere else for one day, and you get another 30. Like, is there some, I don't know if that's not in this plan, but just, I guess, a thought if this becomes a problem.
Or simply like switching rooms?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that, I know for a fact that has been cited in other communities, and they do have different items like, 30 days within a 6-month period or 30 days within a 12-month period. I think there's kind of that fine line between contractors that have a job in a community and they're there for an extended period of time. Now, most of the time, they're on for 10 days and they're off for a week and they go back to, Oklahoma or Nebraska, wherever they're from. But I think there are cases where you could have a contract or employees of a contracting service that are within a facility longer, and yeah, I think they could abuse that. And that may mean, I think if it's concerning now, we can come back and we can look at an amendment to transient, and or we can kind of see how it goes as we continue to enforce this, and if we feel as though it's being abused, come back at that time and amend the ordinance as well.
Any other questions? Not, what are your wishes? Kyle, does this amendment need to go to the council then after this?
Yes, it would.
Okay. So we're making a recommendation to council to approve this change?
Correct.
Okay.
And both of the conditional use permits were also recommendations to council.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. So why don't we open the public hearing on the changes? So at 5:11 PM, we can open the public hearing. Does anybody wish to speak against making the changes to the zoning code? And for a second time, does anybody wish to speak against the changes to amend the zoning code? And for a third time, does anybody wish to speak against? Seeing none, for the first time, does anyone wish to speak in favor of the change? And for a second time, does anybody wish to speak in favor? Last chance, for a third time, does anybody wish to speak in favor? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing at 5:12 PM. What are your wishes? Good catch, thank you.
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Lee,
Second.
seconded by Eric. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Does anybody oppose? That motion carries. We're on to item number 10, which is adjournment. What are your wishes?
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion by Ryan,
Second.
second by Ben. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody, aye. Does anybody oppose? That motion carries. Thank you, everyone.